Hello and welcome to Restoration DIY, and a special welcome to the first time viewers. In this episode, I'll be making a bowl using some offcuts from previous projects, cast in coloured epoxy resin. It's a good way to make use of the offcuts, and I don't have to throw them away. After coating the inside of the casting bucket with machine wax to stop the epoxy from sticking, I placed an offcut from a blank in the bottom, and in no particular order, I arranged the other offcuts, trying to keep the voids as small as possible. This went straight forward. The only drama was a small flood. You can see it creeping into view in the bottom right of the screen. The rain continued for about 30 minutes, and the water level got to about 25 an inch above the garage floor. My futile attempt at stopping the advancing water lasted a few seconds before I retreated to higher ground. Eventually the rain stopped, the flood subsided, and play could continue. Confident the rain had stopped, at least for a good while, I mixed my usual epoxy resin. In total I mixed 4 batches, each with 150 grams of Part B to 300 grams of Part A. The chosen colour was ocean blue mica powder with added dark blue alcohol dye. I try to keep the weights of resin to the prescribed amounts, but I do make adjustments along the way. So if I pour 158 grams of Part B, I will do my best to add 316 grams of Part A. So far I haven't had any problems with the resin curing process, apart from a few cracks here and there. After mixing the first 2 batches, I added them to the casting. This I hoped would retard the curing process. With the last 2 batches added, I realised I would struggle to get a good fixing to mount the blank to the lathe, so I decided to add a waste block. A bit messy, but with that in place, I could put some weight on to stop the offcuts floating in the resin and place the whole thing in the pressure pot. The pressure pot came with a stainless steel container, which I used to hold the casting bucket, just in case there were any leaks. I tightened the lid down and added around 50 to 55 psi and left it overnight to cure. It's the next day and the blank has cured, though the top of it will need a bit of work before I can mount it to the lathe. I used a large disc sander to take the hide spots off the offcuts, marked the centre, drilled an 8mm hole, which I used to fix it to the lathe on the woodworm screw. With the blank safely fixed in the lathe, I could begin turning. The Easy Wood Tools full-size finisher began proceedings. This time the blank was well balanced, so I could quickly build the speed up to around 1000 RPM. First off, I concentrated on the base, exposing the oak blank. Once that was done, I could then decide how I wanted it to look, though in the back of my mind I always knew it would have a pedestal. Once the oak was exposed, I started to form the cutout section. This went very well. I used a combination of the carbide cutters and the 3/8 bowl gouge to slowly remove material, being careful not to get a catch on the opposite side I was cutting on. I also began to think about how the side of the bowl would look, and quite early on I decided to keep it simple, with no overhanging rim, just a straight, slightly sloping line from the curve of the base cutout to the top. skew chisel came into play to blend the side into the curved base cutout. It was at this point I also made the decision to take a bit more out to make the cutout more pronounced. I also considered putting a flat vertical face on the upstand of the cutout, but I think I'll save that for the next bowl. I'm not convinced it'll look right. I used a skew chisel and a mid-sized carbide cutter to gently remove material, slowly cutting down into the oaken resin. When that was done, I used a skew chisel to blend and fare the top section into the base. With the outside done, or so I thought, I noticed a crack in the resin. I didn't try and hide it. I went straight for the black Starbond superglue, allowing the black liquid to fill it before spraying it with accelerator. When it dried, I used a skew chisel and the carbide cutter to gently cut the glue back to the surface of the resin. Swiftly moving on, I moved the toll post round 90 degrees, flattened the base, then formed the mortise. Same as usual, I measured and marked a 70mm circle and cut the outer edge with a thin parting tool, the 3/8 bowl gouge to remove the inner material, then the dovetail cutter to form, you guessed it, the dovetail, and finally the skew chisel to clean it up. All done, I sanded from 80 to 3000 grit. Then, with a few product omissions, I started my usual finishing process, beginning with a clean down with denatured alcohol, then sanding sealer, just one application, denibbed with a non-abrasive Scotch pad. Followed by Yorkshire Grit abrasive paste, just one coat, applied liberally and cleaned away with paper towel. Then the two Merkur products. First, Polar Shine 10 polishing compound, applied perhaps a little too liberally and cleaned away for the next compound. Polar Shine 5 next, applied not so liberally and cleaned away with paper towel. It's important to say the last two Merkur products are just to polish the epoxy resin, and I made sure I removed all the residue before moving on to the last stage. Wood Wax 22, applied sparingly, concentrating on the areas with the oak offcuts, polished off to achieve a deep shine. And to finish, Hampshire Sheen Gloss Finishing Wax, one coat, applied with paper towel and polished off with more paper towel. This is, to be honest, an optional step and not strictly necessary. In the future, I think I'll adopt an either or approach with this and Wood Wax 22. With the outside done, I turn the bowl around, safely held in place by the 4-jaw chuck and the tailstock for added security. I could then begin turning. First off, I had to remove the protruding offcuts, then I could begin hollowing out. I used a 3/8 bowl gouge to gently cut away the oak offcuts. When I started to get into more epoxy resin, I switched between the Easywood Tools full-size finisher gouge and the mid-size carbide cutter. So whilst this is playing through, I would like to thank everyone for watching this episode and to consider having a look at some of my other videos. I will be publishing one every week and I will be trying more varied projects. I have one ongoing at the moment, which I'm looking forward to uploading in a couple of weeks. Also, if you like my content, please subscribe. A thumbs up will be great, and leave a comment. I enjoy reading them and I always try to respond to as many as possible. And with that, thank you very much and back to the video. The full-size carbide cutter made easy work of removing the oak and epoxy resin from the inside of the bowl. Once I got close to the full depth, I could remove the piece in the middle. For this I used a smaller carbide cutter, then I could move the tailstock out of the way to get better access. As I removed the waste material, a number of cracks had appeared. I kept going, hoping that some of the cracks would be cut away, but I wasn't so lucky, and I would have to fix them later on. As I got closer to the finished surface, I used the large negative rake scraper to remove the tool marks and fine-tune the surface. Rather than using the Tormek every time to sharpen my tools, I use a diamond card to redress the cutting edge. This works, though I can only use the card 2 or maybe 3 times before they need the attention of the grinding stone. A final going over with a scraper and the carbide cutter for the tighter curves, the inside was done. After a quick sanding with 80 grit, I set to fixing the cracks, and as before, I wasn't going to try and hide them, so out came the black Starbond super glue. I cleaned the offending crevices out with compressed air before applying the black Starbond. I allowed it to sit for a while, topping it up as it filled the voids. Then I used the accelerator to speed up the curing process. I had to do this a couple of times before the voids were full. Then I used the carbide cutter with a lathe speed turned up to about 1400 RPM to remove the excess. After sanding from 80 to 3000 grit, I gave it a thorough clean down with denatured alcohol before applying sanding sealer, which I denibbed with a non-abrasive Scotch pad. Then I applied a single coat of Yorkshire Grit abrasive paste, all cleaned off, ready for polishing the epoxy resin. For this, as before on the outside, I use Merkur polishing compound. First up is Polar Shine 10, just a single application, polished off, ready for the next compound. Polar Shine 5 completes the resin polishing, just a single coat, polished off with clean paper towel. Then Wood Wax 22, a single coat, polished off to a deep shine. For note, the lathe speed throughout the finishing process is around 900 RPM, except for the Yorkshire Grit, which I slow down to around 400 RPM for the initial run, speeding up to clean it all away. And finally, Hampshire Sheen Gloss Finishing Wax, just one coat, polished off to complete the finishing process. That's it, another project finished, and I like it. The swirls in the blue epoxy seem to go on forever, and I hope you like it too. As I said earlier, I will be uploading some different projects quite soon, but they take a while to complete, so in the meantime, I have a few more resin projects to keep the weekly schedule going. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. A thumbs up will be great, and comments are always welcome. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.